So now we go onwards in the program. So now we have we are going to the international level, because we know, as already from the Jukka's presentation in the beginning, most of the work has been done so far on the international level to protect the traditional knowledge, and we have two speeches from two international organizations, and we will start with UNESCO's workshop about the protection of intangible cultural heritage, and the report that was done about the workshop in Karasjok, Norway. So Silja Sombu from the Sami Parliament in Norway will have the floor next. Please, Silja, you have the floor.
Joo, både päivi ja puhdaspuhkaita. Kiihtuu podiumis, ja on hui kiihtuvas kuophus ja kulttuuriministeriöllä vältän tämän liipa laiditai just tämän tiedjuvelemme, tämän nähtä tiedjuvelemme. Thank you everyone, and hello to you, and thank you for inviting me. And I want to thank you at the ministry to facilitating this kind of meeting that is really important, and in the time, in the wind, one could say. I had prepared my lecture in Sami, but I will try to do my best to do this in English due to translation and interpretation challenges. So my name is Silja Sombi, and I am here on behalf of the Sami Parliament and the cultural section there. I've been working with this traditional knowledge, or in particular the ICH, the intangible cultural heritage issues, ever since I started, and the departing point was actually the Finnish Sami Parliament, who approached us and was talking about that the ICH question, the intangible cultural heritage question, is a vital one, and they want to proceed with that, and hence we started a common project, and it was launched into this huge cultural heritage conference that took place in Anar on the Finnish side, and in that regards we had our own Sami working group, which was of course consisting of the Finnish Sami Parliament by Riitta Ortiberg. We had the Sami Artist Union STR, we had the Sami Council there, and also of course us at the Sami Norwegian Parliament, but we also had the Swedish Sami Duetti, the Sami Handicrafters Union, which was also representing the Swedish Sami Parliament at the time. So this was the starting point, and I just wanted to stress before I continue, there are so many interesting themes here, like for instance the way this morning has revolved around the Sami vocal expressions joik, löd, ljud. It's so interesting, we could just talk the whole day about it, but I will try to be very to talk about this workshop that we were facilitating. So I'm giving you a bit of the context and the background to how we came to that workshop. So anyways, we were having this preparing for this huge cultural heritage conference. And then we also had in that regards, we had the possibility to participate in this capacity building course that the Museo, I don't know how I said Musea Laadus in Sami, and Leena Marcio, that they had organized with the facilitators Rick Smits and Harriet Deacon, which was also very interesting for us. And simultaneously, we were also having close cooperation with the Norwegian Arts Council Norway, and because they are the ones who are supposed to implement the 2003 ICH Convention in Norway. And in that regard, they were searching for possibilities how to actually take the Sami side and the national minorities, both indigenous peoples and the national minorities, how they should be also take a part in the convention work in Norway. So in that we had a very good cooperation with the Arts Council Norway, in particular Hildegunn Bjørgen, and she decided to challenge us at the Sami Parliament that could we not do a workshop together with these questions. So these two processes were happening simultaneously. So then we came up with the idea that we should do this workshop. And it was very clear from us at the Sami side, as it has been emphasized multiple times here, that you cannot just do a workshop exclusively on the Norwegian side on this kind of issue, because it is a pan-Sami question. Because for instance, ICH, the intangible cultural heritage questions, they are not only we cannot discuss it only on the Norwegian side. We also have to include both the Swedish side and the Finnish side, and of course also the Russian side. But this regard, when it comes to the ICH convention, is that Russia has not ratified the 2003 convention. That was just a small side note to that. But anyways, it was very important that we started to talk about these issues, and in particular that we talk about inside the Sami communities, that how can we use the ICH convention and how can it benefit us? And is it possible to fit it into a Sami context? And as it has been mentioned here earlier, challenges. For instance, public domain is a huge challenge to not only Sami community and communities, but also indigenous communities in general, as well as the inventorying and the representative list process. Of course, there are very lengthy processes that require a lot of time only to get to the representative list level. But the question is that a model that suits Sami questions, hence also indigenous questions? Yes. So in order to facilitate this kind of these questions in the best possible manner, we started a working group which was consisting of us at the Sami Parliament, me and my colleague Siri Wernberg. We had the Norwegian Arts Council, Hildegunn Bjørgen, and then we of course had the two facilitators, which were then Harriet Deacon and Rick Smith. And Harriet will of course they continue here after me to come up with what she got out of this this workshop. We also had the Finnish Sami Parliament coming in and was listening and coming with their input in this working group. And the challenge was, of course, how can we fit this course into a Sami context to make it very applicable for Sami participants. So then we were looking at good examples. We found some that could be very relevant in this course, and then of course we had the sun symbol that will also be touched upon later, as well as we also took up the Disney cooperation, because it was the Disney animation Frozen 2 was about to be launched, so it was on everybody's mind, those at the end of 2019. And because the initial course that I participated in with my Sami peers, I have to mention that we were many Sami who were participating in that course that was held in Helsinki, Helsingfors. And it was a lengthy course. It took 5 days, and we found that 5 days will be too long a time for our Sami participants. We are lacking of human resource in the Sami society and resources in general. So 5 days will be a bit too stretch too far. So we it to 3 days. And of course, we wanted to invite participants from all over Sápmi, not only Norwegian side, although it, of course, the focus was very much on the Norwegian side, because we have our Sámi Parliament was active in this process, as well as the Arts Council Norway. And of course, and another big challenge was also the language, because we decided it had to be interpreted into Sami, Northern Sami. But there are very, very new, but it's not only the wording itself, it's also all the language itself within the convention, and all the specific wordings and yes, all the words that are used that are very new to everybody. So that was also one of the main reasons why I had to take it in Sami. Anyways, we went to Karasjok. We were there for 3 days in November 2019. We had participants from all 3 countries, but of course mostly from the Norwegian side. There were participants from all levels of society, museums, organizations, archives, and also single people who were working on their own with issues to ICH and also traditional knowledge. And we had very many interesting discussions and case studies that were looking into this, the indigenous approach to this, for instance, the ICH. For instance, as mentioned here earlier, like this over-commercialization and the touristification is a huge threat in this regards. Whenever issues become goes into the public domain, and how it can also shape the ICH. For instance, there were examples that there are single parts of ICH that can be very popular, and they can overshadow, other parts of the same cultural heritage, and hence it will, it will maybe make sure that all the resources will go to only that one part of the ICH, whereas other ICH elements are overshadowed, or that you get so much tourists that it will actually make it impossible to do that, to continue that ICH element, and also that it will not benefit the local community in any ways. So there were very many interesting conversations and thoughts. And one of the big challenge was, of course, also the WIPO questions, because the WIPO many of these issues are also related to WIPO, but I will come back to that. But anyway, what we found out after that workshop was that we have to look closer into the ICH convention, and how can you use it when you are not focusing on the representative list or even the inventorying, because these are questions that also have to be internally discussed within the Sami community. Is this what we need? Can it benefit us? And what are the challenges if we were to go in those directions? There are, of course, positive sides and negative sides to all of those. And another outcome after the workshop was to see how can the indigenous participation be improved when it comes to the ICH convention work, because it's quite obvious that or it's quite known that at the ICH convention work, there are not it's not a very high level of indigenous participation in that work. And there are also not very many indigenous NGOs, and we don't have any Sami NGO working at the ICH with the ICH towards the ICH convention. And that is also something that has to be improved if that is a step forward in this direction. we also were looking at and afterwards we've been having some meetings together with Arts Council Norway and with UNESCO Secretariat, and they have been very much shown a great deal of interest into the workshop that we carried out in Karasjokka, and maybe there could maybe be a possibility that we will continue the same model towards at an international level, at an UNESCO level, but that is only at the very beginning, that discussions. And we are also going to continue the cooperation with the Norwegian Arts Council. We're going to look at the webinar, if there are any other webinar possibilities. For instance, look at this WIPO question, the WIPO approach to this convention. That is a suggestion, and that is also something that we are looking at. And this is also a result after the workshop in Karasjok. And of course, just to close up, we are also working on this project that both Aili Keskitalo and Magnus Vineng have been working, that they have mentioned that we're looking at how to find the protection and the safeguarding measures at the Pan-Sami level, at the SPR, Sami Parliamentary Council level. Yes, and there I will stop. Thank you. Kiitos.
Thank you very much, Silja. I think it's wonderful to see the enthusiasm and the same one that I have as well in order to improve the situation on the protection of traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. These aspects we can find synergies in different instruments if we find the right way to do it, because it's really important that the Sami people themselves find it useful and that it's inclusive from all aspects. Okay, so now I will give the floor to Harriet, and thereafter that to Daphne, and try to be very, very brief. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you for inviting me to talk. Also very grateful to Silja for her kindness in covering a number of the issues that were discussed in the workshop. And as she spoke, I realized how much we had squeezed into the 3 days. And I'm very happy that there have been so many developments after it, including this webinar. I think I'm speaking a little bit on behalf also of Riek Smit, who was the co-facilitator with me in the workshop. We are UNESCO facilitators, and we used a lot of the UNESCO material in the workshop, but at the same time, the brief for the workshop was a lot broader. And you can see here, just as a summary of some of the workshop themes, I think Silja's covered some of them, that we tried to look at UNESCO and WIPO issues on the international level. Where are the opportunities for Sami involvement? But we also tried to look within UNESCO at how some of the issues around tangible and intangible heritage, around world heritage and memory of the world archives, relate to some of the key questions that Sami had around cultural heritage safeguarding. And I think that if I can take a step back from this workshop for a moment, I think that although, as Anna says, we need to look for synergies between the approach in UNESCO or the approach in WIPO, from a community perspective, there are often quite severe gaps between what's available in terms of the discussion, for example, on cultural industries, in the discussion on intangible heritage safeguarding, and in this discussion on protection of traditional knowledge, or TCEs, through IP. And in that gap, I think, sits the discussions that Thomas was talking about this morning, where you're looking at what is the benefit to Sami in terms of both the project on livelihoods and the project on decolonization and revitalization. So from a community perspective, when we started reorienting some of these discussions to the community perspective, we found that there are a number of key areas where we still need quite a lot of further discussion. And that's why I'm very happy about this initiative, because I think that on a Pan-Sami level, obviously those discussions will start happening in a more concentrated way, as Celia said, but also in terms of the network of experts or government agencies that are supporting that process from the outside. We need to be thinking in terms of these thematic issues and trying to fill those gaps. So that's what we tried to talk about in a way in these 3 days. My own other work on heritage-sensitive intellectual property and marketing strategies has tried to look at how what we need in terms of filling that gap from a community perspective. And I think this is an area where quite a bit of further discussion is needed. Can I have the next slide, please? So I just wanted to point to a couple of the results. I mean, Celia has already said from a Sami perspective, to some extent, what they got out of the workshop. But from the facilitator's perspective, I think what was very clear is that when one talks about how the UN agencies or how government ministries or experts can support Indigenous peoples in moving forward their agendas, it's very important to think of it in an interdisciplinary way and to acknowledge these connections between tangible heritage, intangible heritage, IP, and so on. I think what became very clear to me is how important it is to consider the long histories of disadvantage, oppression, colonization as well in this mix. And I think that the second issue was, I think, the importance of talking about education in this process as well. There were quite a few participants talking about cultural education in the Sami community, and I think that's an important part of the story. The second issue is, I think that these questions are quite complex, and I felt that we made our most significant advances in the discussion when we started talking about quite practical issues and problems that the community faced, and then moved on from there. And so I was very happy to see that there are a number of practical examples that will also be discussed in the webinar today. I think the third point that a number of people have said today, and was obviously on the agenda, is this issue of Pan-Sami or Pan-Sapmi initiatives, and also cross-border initiatives from the government ministries in the various countries. I think there the sun symbol case is a good example of it. And I'm looking forward to hear what Martin has to say later as well. And then finally, yes, there are a number of possibilities. It's clear, as Celia said, that WIPO has had much greater opportunity for Indigenous peoples to interact with at the international level with the discussions on TK and TCEs. And in UNESCO until now, it hasn't been as easy to find a place for Indigenous engagement. And I think there is definitely interest from the UNESCO side, and I'm sure there will be support from states parties in this regard as well. I know the Nordic countries are starting to mention this issue at the international level in the UNESCO forums. Next slide, and I think that's it for me. Okay, thank you very much. I'll end there.
Thank you, Harriet. We will continue right away to Daphne if Daphne is available. And then I wrote to the comment section that before the break, we could try to also have the speeches of Charlotte von Troil and Linda Lund from the next session in order to then boot the interpretation system and try to come back again after the break. Okay, so Daphne, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anna. Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank Anna and the organizers for inviting WIPO to participate in these important discussions. I was asked to talk a little bit about the practical workshop on IP and traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions that took place for Arctic, for the Arctic region, that took place in Iqaluit last May. But before I do that, I'd just like to say a few introductory words. So when we think about protecting traditional cultural expressions and traditional knowledge, it's true to say that intellectual property is a factor that should be considered, and I would say it's one of the pieces of the puzzle. And I think that previous speakers have already illustrated very well that then intellectual property then to think about how this will happen. So, and it's a very good first step, as Yuka mentioned, and one of the objectives of this seminar, to see when we have a number of existing IP rights, and can they be useful to protect traditional cultural expressions? And they certainly can be useful to some extent. And I think it's already a good step to be conscious of the tools that already exist and the opportunities that they can offer. That being said, and I think that everyone will agree in this seminar, that there are a number of gaps in that protection that the existing tools offer, and that's why when we consider how to fill in those gaps, some of the options are either to adapt our existing IP tools to better protect traditional cultural expressions and traditional knowledge, or then to create new tools, sui generis tools we call them in the IP world, and that is to create a new IP law that's based on the model of the existing laws that would then specifically protect traditional cultural expressions. And as Yuka mentioned at the beginning, this is what, at the international level at least, the Intergovernmental Committee on Intellectual Property and Genetic Resources, Traditional Knowledge and Folklore is trying to do. But as was mentioned as well, the IGC, that's how we call that committee, the IGC is a very complex process and it's a slow process. And for that reason, a number of countries and a number of regions have already started at their national and regional level to consider additional IP types of laws to better protect traditional cultural expressions. And I think this is part of the discussion also that we're having today. So these were just a few words to provide a little bit of context from the IP perspective. But being conscious of the time, obviously I'm happy to continue discussing about these things in the discussion later on. But I would like to say a few words about that practical workshop. So that practical workshop on IP and traditional knowledge, traditional cultural expressions for countries from the Arctic region was co-organized by WIPO and the Government of Canada, and it took place last May in Iqaluit. And the workshop brought together indigenous peoples, so Inuit and Sami, as well as government representatives from 3 countries, Canada, Finland, and Sweden. And Denmark and Norway, who were invited, were unfortunately not able to attend the practical workshop. Now, the practical workshop had 3 primary objectives. So the first objective was to foster cooperation between government officials and indigenous peoples within each country, but also importantly, between the countries of the Arctic region. The second objective was to impart basic knowledge of the main principles, systems, and tools of the IP system and how they relate to indigenous peoples. And that basically was done by both emphasizing the potential value that intellectual property tools could bring in support of the protection of traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions, but also emphasize some of the challenges. And the third, and I think one of the most, in my view, important objectives of that workshop was to facilitate country-level exchanges on experiences and best practices with the IP protection of traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. Now, in terms of the format of the workshop, I think the practical workshop was both interactive and participatory, and there were presentations, case studies, group work, and a lot of discussions, which was, again, I think the most interesting and important element. And I can see, in the participants to these seminars, I can see many of the participants who were present in Iqaluit, and they'll be able also to share their experiences. But I think what the practical workshop did best, it was that it created an informal space for building relationships and for dialogue and exchanges. And this is a very important part of any process that could lead to development of policies or additional protection for traditional cultural expressions. Now, there were no formal outcomes of the workshop, but nevertheless, and it was not the objective to have any formal outcomes, but there were nevertheless a number of informal outcomes. So I will conclude by sharing some of these important informal outcomes. The first one, and there are four informal outcomes that I would like to mention. So the first one was the identification between the participants of common challenges and common concerns related to the protection and promotion of traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. But then it was also, secondly, the identification of opportunities that surround cultural heritage and economic development linked to promotion of cultural heritage generally. Then there was the identification of common goals, such as, for example, safeguarding cultural identities and preventing from misappropriation of TKN traditional cultural expressions. And finally, and importantly, building relationships between IPLCs, so indigenous peoples and local communities on the one hand, and government officials on the other. And I think that the practical workshop was quite successful in providing a platform for discussion, understanding, and building these relationships. I'm going to conclude by saying that I think that the practical workshop established a foundation for more initiatives on TK&TC's protection in the Arctic region, but also in the Nordic region. And, I see also this seminar as a very important next step to what's coming next year that Anna and Yuka highlighted. And on behalf of WIPO, we will be more than happy to help and assist this process in any way we can.
Thank you very much, Daphne. Thank you for showing this wonderful picture, because I am in there as well, somewhere in the back. It is very interesting. It was very interesting to participate in this Iqaluit workshop, because it really was an eye-opener that these issues are very common to all indigenous peoples, and that the links and the feeling of similar problems for the Sami as well as the Inuits are really there. So practical workshops are the best way, I think, to have this mutual better understanding of the issues, vice versa. So for IP lawyers to understand what actually is the subject matter of traditional knowledge, and then vice versa, that there are the opportunities already under the existing systems, and those can be used to find the actual gaps to be then dealt with.